The wedding the whole city had been waiting for was falling apart. I was wearing a custom wedding gown handcrafted by an Italian master, adorned with 999 tiny diamonds, standing under a stage vibrant with fresh flowers. Waiting not for my groom, Sterling Vance, but for his driver, Higgins, who rushed up to the stage and handed me a phone. On the other end of the line, amidst the chaotic background noise and the faint wail of ambulance sirens, came Sterling's hurried, unprecedentedly anxious voice. "Harper, Serafina was in a car accident. I have to go right now. Just try to handle the ceremony for now." Before I could even reply, he hung up. Below the stage, the whispers of hundreds of guests pierced me like needles. My world, in that very moment, was reduced to the MC's awkward voice and the chaotic thud of my mother suddenly fainting. That night, our Mercer Island newlywed estate was brightly lit, but I was the only one sitting amidst the custom monogrammed confetti scattered across the room until dawn. I knew that the moment he threw me and our wedding away like garbage, certain things were already dead. The cold light from the crystal chandelier reflected off my heavy dress. It was so heavy I could barely breathe. I remembered the MC wiping sweat from his forehead, gripping the microphone, his voice echoing through the sound system with a barely noticeable tremble. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. The groom, Sterling Vance, had a sudden emergency and is on his way. For now, please enjoy some classical music." The uproar from the crowd had only grown louder. The unrestrained gossip crashed against the stage like tidal waves, nearly drowning me. I had gripped my bouquet so tightly that the delicate champagne rose petals crumpled under my freezing fingertips. I could feel my father Arthur's grim, ashen face and the trembling fingers of my mother Eleanor gripping my arm. What on earth is going on with Sterling? My mother had choked out in disbelief. I hadn't said a word, just stared at the heavy, gold-plated doors of the banquet hall. But in my head, the scene from 10 minutes prior kept playing on a loop. Higgins, pale and pushing through the crowd, handing me the active phone call. Sterling's voice, sounding a million miles away, filled with intense frustration and extreme anxiety. "Harper, Serafina was in a car accident. I have to go right now. Just try to handle the ceremony for now. Serafina Croft." That name was like a poisoned needle, piercing through all my self-deception in an instant. Childhood best friend, treating her like a little sister, telling me I was the only woman he wanted to marry, it was all utter nonsense. What kind of good friend makes a man abandon his bride, humiliate both families, and ditch the city's elite at his own wedding just to rush to her side? Whatever warmth was left in my heart had finally gone completely cold. The classical music was still playing inappropriately in the background. A dream wedding turned into a cruel joke. I took a deep breath. Right before the MC completely lost control of the room, and right before my furious father stood up, I suddenly raised my hand. The music abruptly stopped. Hundreds of eyes, shocked, pitying, and curious, locked onto me. I took the trembling microphone from the MC. My fingertips were freezing, but my voice was surprisingly steady, carrying a crisp calmness that even shocked me. "I want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend the wedding of Sterling Vance and me today." The room fell dead silent. I continued, every word echoing clearly over the polished marble floors. "I deeply regret to inform you that because the groom cannot be present, this wedding will not proceed." The room exploded. Camera flashes from invited media outlets started firing nonstop, like sharks smelling blood in the water. I didn't care about any of it. I only looked at my parents, seeing the heartbreak and surging fury in their eyes. "Mom, Dad," I spoke into the mic, my voice choked but loud enough for the front row to hear. "I am sorry for embarrassing you. Please handle the fallout. I'm tired." Without looking at anyone else, I shoved the microphone back into the stiff MC's chest, hoisted up my heavy skirt, turned around, and walked step by step back down the flower-strewn aisle I had just walked up. My back was completely straight. I couldn't collapse, at least not here. Behind me, I could hear my father suppressing his rage to maintain order, arranging the guests' exit, my mother's muffled sobs, and the countless gasps of the crowd. But none of it mattered to me anymore. I didn't take the bridal limousine. The family driver brought another car and drove me back to the lavishly decorated but terrifyingly empty lakefront estate. This was the marital home Sterling had chosen, using a large chunk of my trust fund for the down payment. He said he would give me the most perfect home. Now, I was the only one in it. Martha, the housekeeper, walked up to me, her face full of worry, hesitating as if she wanted to say something. I twitched the corners of my mouth, wanting to give her a reassuring smile, but my facial muscles were too stiff. "Martha, go get some rest. You don't need to worry about me." I waved her off, dismissing the other maids who wanted to help, and walked up the spiral staircase alone. I stepped into the master bedroom. Red and white rose petals were everywhere. The bed linens, the drapes, the custom decorations, all of it screamed of a wedding. On the vanity sat the bridal portrait we took just days ago. In the photo, Sterling was holding me, smiling gently and passionately. I used to think that was the very image of happiness. Looking at it now, I only saw calculation in those charming eyes. The curve of his lips wasn't affection, it was pure deceit. I walked over, raised my hand, and gently traced his handsome face in the photo. Then, with all my strength, I smashed the giant crystal frame against the hardwood floor. It shattered instantly, the jagged cracks crawling across our smiling faces, tearing everything beautiful into fragments. I stood before the wreckage. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just felt cold, a cold that seeped into my very bones. I took off the heavy tiara, unpinned my elaborate hairstyle, stripped off the expensive wedding gown that felt like a shackle, threw it on the floor, and put on the simplest cotton pajamas I owned. I sat down in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. The night was deep. Only a few streetlights reflected on the water, swaying in the wind, as fragile as my collapsing world. My phone sat there like a brick. Sterling didn't call. He didn't text. Was he sitting by Serafina's hospital bed, holding her hand, comforting her with sweet words? Was he blaming me for being an unreasonable bride? Why couldn't I be understanding of his helpless situation and his noble heart? Minutes and hours ticked by. The view outside turned from pitch black to dawn, and then the sun broke through the glass, mercilessly illuminating the messy room, my pale face, and the dried tear tracks under my eyes. I sat there all night. I waited all night, until the last bit of warmth in my heart completely died, freezing into solid ice. It wasn't until 9:00 a.m. that my phone finally rang with a harsh notification. Not Sterling. It was a picture message from an unknown number. I opened it. The photo was slightly blurry, looking like it was taken in the VIP corridor of some high-end Bellevue hospital. In the frame, Sterling's back was to the camera, his head slightly bowed. In front of him, a woman in a hospital gown with long, loose hair and a pale face was leaning against his chest, clutching the fabric of his shirt. The woman looked up, tears seemingly glistening in the corners of her eyes, looking incredibly pitiful. It was Serafina Croft. Even from just his back, I recognized Sterling's clothes. It was the same Tom Ford dress shirt and vest I had personally picked out and ironed for him before the wedding yesterday. Only now, the shirt was wrinkled beyond recognition, and his bow tie was missing. He hadn't even changed his clothes. He had guarded her all night, or perhaps even longer. Below the picture, a text from the same unknown number read, "Harper, I'm so sorry. I really didn't mean to. Sterling was just too worried about me. Please don't blame him. If you have to blame someone, blame my poor health." A classic damsel in distress manipulation. The tone sounded apologetic, but it was purely a boast. I stared at the screen and suddenly let out a soft laugh. The sound echoed in the empty room, carrying a chill that even scared me. Serafina Croft, Sterling Vance. You two are really something. One uses clumsy victim tactics, the other is eager to fall into the trap. Together, you turned me, the Kensington family, and this marriage into a joke for the entire city. Just as my fingertips turned white from gripping the phone, it buzzed again. This time, a call from Sterling. I stared at the words hubby flashing on the screen, a contact name I had just changed yesterday morning. It looked so bitter now. I didn't rush to answer. The phone rang patiently, over and over, as if flaunting his delayed, patronizing concern. When it was about to go to voicemail, I slowly pressed accept and brought it to my ear. I didn't speak first. Sterling's voice came through, hoarse from staying up all night, carrying a trace of guilt. "Harper," he called my name, hesitating as if organizing his words. "Are you still at the estate?" I remained silent. He seemed frustrated by my silence, his tone growing harsher. "About last night, I know you were wronged, but Serafina's condition was truly critical. She had a cranial hemorrhage. We almost lost her. I couldn't just stand by and watch her die, do you understand?" I let out a soft scoff. That sound seemed to infuriate him. His voice rose, carrying blatant blame. "Harper, what kind of attitude is that? Serafina is your friend. She's been sickly since she was a kid. She didn't want to burden us, so she ran off alone, got upset, and got into an accident. Don't you have any compassion? Can you stop being so selfish and stubborn? Selfish. Stubborn. Hearing his shameless, twisted logic, the last tiny flame in my heart flickered and died completely. It was replaced by a rigid, freezing darkness. I slowly opened my mouth, my voice hoarse but incredibly calm, so calm it felt foreign to me. Are you done? Sterling was likely choked by my reaction, pausing for a second. I continued in a flat, waveless tone. Sterling Vance, the wedding is over. The exact moment you abandoned me for Serafina, it was over. He tried to interrupt, but I didn't want to hear it. Right now, you're at the hospital with your good friend Serafina, aren't you? I asked. So what? She isn't out of the woods yet. She needs someone to look after her. His voice hardened. Harper, stop being unreasonable. Once I settle things here, I'll come home and explain. Redoing the wedding isn't impossible. No need, I cut him off. Those 2 words were spoken lightly, but they carried the weight of a mountain. The other end went dead silent. I could almost see his stunned, frozen expression through the cellular waves. I spoke into the receiver, clearly and slowly declaring every word. Sterling Vance, we are done. Without giving him another chance to yell, question, or justify himself, I hung up. Then, I dragged this number saved for less than 24 hours straight into my block list. Finally, complete silence. I stood up, slightly dizzy from sitting so long, and held onto the window frame to steady myself. I looked down at the vibrant garden below, then far out at the sparkling lake. A crazy but incredibly clear thought sprang from the bottom of my heart, growing wildly and consuming every inch of my mind. And, no, this was just the beginning. Sterling Vance, Serafina Croft, everything you forced upon me, I will make you pay back 1,000-fold. I walked over to the vanity, ignoring the shattered glass on the floor, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside lay an old, heavy black flip phone. It was the phone my father, Arthur Kensington, had solemnly handed to me when I turned 18. He had said, Harper, this phone is only to be turned on when you want to completely abandon the past, or when you face an unsolvable crisis. There is one number inside. Call it, and you get one chance at a new life. But the price is cutting ties with parts of your past, or your past self. My life had been smooth sailing. I was deceived by Sterling's fake devotion, never thinking I'd actually need it. Now, it was time. I picked up the heavy old phone and pressed the power button. The screen lit up with a dim blue glow. In the contacts, there was exactly one unsaved number. I didn't hesitate. I took a deep breath and pressed call. It rang exactly once. The call connected. A deep, steady male voice came through, giving away no age or emotion. Just 2 short words. Harper Kensington. I gripped the phone tightly, my nails digging into my palm, using all my strength to keep my voice calm and decisive. Yes, I need your help. I want revenge. The other end was silent for 2 seconds. 2 seconds so quiet I could hear my own blood rushing against my eardrums. But strangely, I wasn't afraid. I even felt relieved, like I had just burned my only bridge back. Prove you are Harper Kensington, the voice spoke again, still calm, unwavering, devoid of curiosity, just following a verification protocol. I looked up, meeting my own pale, exhausted, yet utterly cold gaze in the vanity mirror. My father is Arthur Kensington. The passcode to this phone is my mother Eleanor's exact birth date, July 3rd. My father told me, if I ever called this number, I had to repeat the exact phrase he told me in his study on my 18th birthday. I paused, memories washing over the freezing sands of my mind, my voice deepening. He said, Harper, wealth and beauty are gifts, but they can also be shackles. Understanding the human heart is harder than keeping a fortune. The Kensington family gives you a safety net, not just money. Faint typing sounds came from the other end. Soon, the voice replied, verification successful. Miss Kensington, you may call me Mr. Thorne. Within the next 72 hours, I will provide shelter and necessary operational support. Please state your core demands and the scope of assets to be processed. Mr. Thorne. No full name, but it was enough. His terrifying efficiency gave my suspended, freezing heart a small ledge to grab onto. I spoke faster, my mind crystal clear in this state of extreme calmness. First, I need a new legal identity, entirely separate from the Kensingtons and Sterling Vance, processed quickly to handle some affairs. Second, I own 8 luxury investment properties gifted to me before marriage, scattered across different states. I need them sold secretly and quickly within a week, preferably 3 days at or slightly below market value. The funds must not touch any account linked to my old identity or the Vance family. Third, I need a husband. Someone who can immediately shield me legally and socially and drive Sterling Vance to absolute despair. When I finished, I held my breath. On the other end, Mr. Thorne seemed to let out a soft chuckle. It was brief, almost an illusion, carrying an understanding vibe of, just as I expected, very clear logic. It seems Miss Kensington has thought this through. The new identity and asset liquidation will be initiated within 24 hours. As for a husband, he paused, weighing his words. I happen to be a suitable candidate. I need a marriage to avoid family politics and unwanted external attention. You need my status and resources to achieve your goals. A mutual benefit, a contract marriage, 2-year term. During these 2 years, we will not interfere in each other's private lives, but we will maintain a dignified front in public. After 2 years, we terminate the relationship peacefully. You will receive a generous settlement and a completely clean slate. That is, of course, if you can accept a purely transactional bond. A contract marriage. No interference. 2 years. Every word was as cold as commercial terms. But right now, it felt more solid and reliable than any vague promise of love. I accepted without hesitation. As long as you can make my ex-fiancé Sterling Vance and his best friend Seraphina Croft suffer immensely. Rest assured, Mr. Thorne's voice carried an undetectable edge. I will gladly assist. Someone will contact you regarding the property sales. Your meeting with your new husband to sign the agreement will be scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. I will provide the location later. For the next 48 hours, Miss Kensington, please keep your phone on and take good care of yourself. The call ended. I gripped the old phone, my palms breaking out in a thin layer of sweat, not from anxiety, but from a fierce, almost euphoric determination. The first step was taken. I walked to the window, pulling the heavy drapes wide open to let the midday sun flood the room, exposing the mess and the shattered pane. Then, I picked up my regular smartphone, ignored the countless missed calls and texts from my parents, friends, and unknown numbers, and hit Martha's intercom extension. Martha, I've calmed down. Bring 2 people upstairs. Clear out all the bridal decorations in the master bedroom, the dress, and the trash on the floor. I glanced at the shattered portrait. Throw it all outside, as far away as possible. Then prep the guest suite I used to stay in before the wedding. I'll be sleeping there from now on. Martha seemed to breathe a sigh of relief on the other end, quickly regaining her professional housekeeper tone. Yes, ma'am. I'll arrange it immediately. Also, I added, starting today, pack up all of Sterling's belongings in this house and shove them in the darkest corner of the storage room. I don't want to see a single trace of him ever again. Understood. Hanging up, I looked around the bridal suite that was once full of hope. My eyes held absolutely no lingering attachment. For the next few hours, I was a spinning top. I called my father, Arthur Kensington. My words were brief. Dad, Sterling and I are done. It's not a lover's spat. It's over completely. Please handle the wedding fallout. I might do some things in the coming days that could cause a bit of an uproar. But don't ask, and don't stop me. Trust me, and trust the trump card you gave me. My father was silent for a long time before sighing heavily. Harper, I already know. The Kensingtons will always be your backbone. Do whatever you need to do. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you. My mother grabbed the phone, crying so hard she could barely form a sentence, repeating, my poor daughter. That bastard Sterling. I gently comforted her, my heart aching, but mostly filled with absolute resolve. Not long after, a man claiming to be Mr. Thorne's assistant called. He spoke slowly and professionally, directly listing my 8 luxury properties, their exact addresses, deed numbers, and current estimated market values. He stated he had arranged a top-tier anonymous brokerage team to list them across multiple channels. The buyers have clean backgrounds and guaranteed funds. The transaction process will be streamlined, finishing within 48 hours at the earliest. The first property, your downtown Seattle penthouse, the one Sterling Vance loved to show off, will be under contract shortly. The funds will be routed through a series of compliant channels into an offshore account opened specifically for you, ultimately linked to your new identity. We guarantee this entire process will not trigger any alarms for Sterling Vance or his associates. The assistant's voice was as cold as a weather forecast. I closed my eyes, following the plan to prioritize the assets Sterling knew about and valued. Understood, I said. As soon as I hung up, my private inbox received several encrypted emails detailing the asset transfer plans and outlining my new background. I focused all my energy on reviewing every detail. Time flew by in this cold, efficient arrangement. By evening, Martha carefully stepped upstairs to report that the master bedroom was cleared and the guest suite was ready. She lowered her voice to add, "Ma'am, Mr. Van still hasn't called the house. I didn't even look up from my laptop. Yeah. From now on, you don't need to specifically report any news regarding him to me." Understood. Martha quietly withdrew. I moved into the neat, compact guest suite, entirely devoid of Sterling's memories. I took a hot shower, forced down some bland food Martha brought up, and went back to processing emails. In the dead of night, I finally allowed myself a brief pause and opened my practically forgotten social media apps. Unsurprisingly, the wedding disaster was the hottest local gossip. Despite both the Kensingtons and the Vances trying to suppress the negative press, rumors, blurry photos, and speculations were everywhere. On Sterling's page, his latest post from 3 days ago was a teaser from our engagement shoot, captioned, "Holding your hand for the rest of my life." Below it were countless congratulations from people unaware of the truth, mixed with the awkward silence of insiders. On Serafina's page, everything was peaceful. Her latest post was a photo of white lilies by a window, captioned, "Surviving a disaster, thankful for those who care. Especially thankful for the one who rushed to my side without hesitation." Below were comments from mutual friends, saying, "Rest up, Serafina, and surviving a close call means great blessings ahead." Sterling's account had liked the post. Even though he quickly unliked it, someone had already taken a screenshot. Looking at that status and that fleeting like, my heart felt no ripples, only amusement. They didn't even bother wiping the blood off the knife after stabbing the official bride in the heart. Just as I was about to close the app, my phone vibrated. A wealthy socialite who did business with the Vances, and who occasionally chatted with me, sent a cryptic message. "Harper, are you okay?" "I don't know if I should say this, but I think you have the right to know," I replied with a single period. She immediately sent a paparazzi-style photo. Judging by the surroundings, it was the VIP corridor of a Bellevue hospital. In the photo, Sterling's back was to the camera, slightly hunched over. Serafina, in her hospital gown, was on her tiptoes, her arms wrapped intimately around his neck, her cheek pressed against his face. Sterling's hands seemed to be holding her waist. The timestamp was from this afternoon. This photo was far more intimate and blatant than the leaning on his chest photo I got this morning. The socialite's text popped up again. "My cousin is interning at that hospital. She recognized Sterling and Serafina. She said Serafina only had a mild concussion and a scrape, just needing 2-4-hour observation. But Sterling has been guarding her for 2 days, never leaving the hospital." I stared at the photo, seeing Sterling's careful, tender posture, and suddenly felt sick to my stomach. Not heartbreak, just pure nausea. I flicked my finger, saved the photo, and calmly replied to the socialite, "Thank you, I already know." She clearly didn't expect me to be so calm and sent a barrage of comforting texts. I couldn't be bothered to read them and turned on Do Not Disturb. I forwarded that photo, along with Serafina's provoking text from the morning, to Mr. Thorne's assistant, adding a note. "Perhaps this will help my future contract husband better understand the couple he will be dealing with." Minutes later, the assistant replied, "Received. We'll report it as reference material." Additionally, Mr. Thorne asked me to pass along a message. "Miss Kensington, please keep all evidence safe. Tomorrow at 2:00 p.m., please be ready. A car will pick you up to bring you to the Evergreen Private Club to meet Mr. Julian Thorne." Julian Thorne. I finally knew my future husband's name. I silently mouthed it, then turned off the lights and lay down in the dark. 48 hours of despair traded for the absolute resolve to rise from the ashes. Sterling, Serafina, keep playing your deeply in love act. The script for my revenge has just opened its first page. Tomorrow marks the beginning of a new chapter. The next afternoon, at exactly 1:50 p.m., a sleek black Maybach quietly pulled up in front of the estate. The driver, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit and white gloves, stepped out and opened the back door for me with a respectful but cold demeanor. "Miss Kensington, Mr. Thorne sent me to pick you up." I nodded and got in. The car smelled faintly of cedar and leather clean, without a single unnecessary item in sight. I was wearing a minimalist cream-tailored suit dress, light makeup, and my hair pulled back neatly. I had shed the gentle aura of yesterday's bride, replacing it with a deliberately crafted, sharp calmness. I needed Julian Thorne to see that I wasn't a weeping, broken woman, but a partner qualified to work with him. The car drove smoothly toward downtown Seattle, finally pulling into an extremely discreet, highly private country club. Security was incredibly strict. I was led into a private room overlooking the water, pushing open the carved wooden doors. The first thing I saw was a massive window framing a meticulously manicured Zen garden. Standing by the window with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him, was a man in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit. His posture was ramrod straight. Just standing there, he exuded an invisible, overwhelming pressure. Hearing the door open, he slowly turned around. Julian Thorne. I finally saw his face clearly. It was an exceptionally handsome face, but incredibly cold. Deep-set eyes, a strong jawline, thin and defined lips. When his gaze landed on me, it was like a frozen lake on a winter night, calm and waveless, yet radiating a sharpness that could pierce your soul. He looked to be in his early 30s, but his aura was far heavier than his age suggested. "Miss Kensington?" he spoke. His voice was deeper than on the phone, resonating like a cello, entirely devoid of warmth. "Please sit." I sat down in the mahogany chair across from him, keeping my back straight. I didn't avoid his gaze, meeting it directly. A waiter quietly entered, served 2 cups of green tea, and silently left, closing the door. Only the 2 of us remained in the room, accompanied by the faint sound of running water outside. Julian Thorne didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a folder toward me. "This is the draft of the prenuptial agreement. You may review it. The crucial parts are highlighted. A 2-year marriage term, effective from the date of registration. During this time, you must cooperate and appear as my wife at necessary public events, handling my family and the press. In exchange, I will provide you with comprehensive legal, social, and commercial protection, ensure your personal freedom, and assist you in repaying Sterling Vance." He used the word repaying with a hint of cold humor. I opened the agreement. The terms were clear and ruthless, defining separate assets, waiving inheritance rights, establishing privacy boundaries, listing mandatory joint appearances, and detailing a massive financial settlement and an offshore property with a clear title that I would receive upon termination after 2 years. No warmth, just pure calculation. But that was exactly what I needed right now. "What about my 8 properties?" I put the document down and looked up at him. "What's the progress?" Julian picked up his teacup. His long, clean fingers moved gracefully. "Highly efficient. The downtown Seattle penthouse signed a letter of intent with an offshore hedge fund this morning, at 5% below market value. They have paid in full. The paperwork closes tomorrow. Of the 5 properties in major cities, 3 have buyers undergoing background checks and price negotiations. Results within 48 hours. The remaining 2 in less central locations are being pushed through multiple channels. Liquidating them within a week won't be an issue." He paused, his eyes resting on my face as if gauging my reaction. "The capital flow will be completely routed according to your request, passing through multiple filters before landing in an offshore account under your new identity, Vivian Hayes, temporarily. Throughout this entire process, Sterling Vance and Vance Corporation will hear absolutely nothing until their cash flow chain completely snaps." He spoke so calmly, yet I could almost hear the echoing crash of Sterling's future empire collapsing. So fast, so ruthless. This was the power of Julian Thorne. "Very good." I suppressed the emotions in my chest, keeping my voice steady. "So, what is the first thing Mr. Thorne needs my cooperation on?" "Registering our marriage." Julian set his teacup down with a crisp clink. "The sooner, the better. Tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m., I'll send someone to pick you up. Use your new identity. Afterward, you need to move into my downtown penthouse. Since you paid the down payment for that lakefront estate, let it rot along with Sterling Vance. You need an environment entirely separated from him. Tomorrow." Even though I was prepared, hearing the specific time made my heart clench. Stepping directly from the ruins of one marriage into a purely transactional one felt absurd and freezing. But I had no way back, and I didn't want to retreat. "I agree," I said. "But before moving into your place, I hope to handle a few final personal matters at my current estate. I want to see Sterling return with my own eyes. I want to see his expression when he learns everything. That is a mandatory prologue to my revenge script." Julian seemed to see right through me, the corners of his mouth curving slightly. The smile was as cold as a blade. Fine. Once the contract takes effect, you have the right to handle your personal matters, provided it doesn't impact the public dignity we agreed upon. He picked up a pen, signed his name on the final page of the agreement, his strokes sharp and decisive, and handed the pen to me. I stared at the paper that would dictate my fate for the next 2 years, took a deep breath, and took the pen. Next to his signature, I signed my legal name for this moment, Harper Kensington. The final stroke felt like it weighed a ton. Julian pulled the agreement back and stood up. Well then, Miss Kensington. Or rather, my future wife. The title rolled off his tongue without an ounce of emotion, just business-like detachment. I will see you tomorrow. My assistant will handle all subsequent procedures. He will keep you updated on the property sales. I stood up as well. Then, Mr. Thorne. Here's to a pleasant partnership. A pleasant partnership. He extended his hand. I hesitated for a second, then shook it. His hand was dry, strong, and slightly cold. He let go immediately, didn't say another word, and walked out of the room. I sat alone in the room for a while longer, looking at the quiet garden outside, a complex, indescribable emotion swelling inside me. Soon my phone buzzed, pulling me back to reality. It was an encrypted text from Julian's assistant. Miss Kensington, confirmed. 8:30 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday. A car will pick you up at the estate. Please bring your original new ID documents. Additionally, we just heard back from the brokers. Buyers for the second and third properties in Manhattan and Silicon Valley have wired deposits. The transaction is in process, and the capital separation speed is exceeding expectations. Right after, another text popped up from the private investigator I had hired. It was brief and sharp as a poisoned hook. Sterling Vance discharged Serafina Croft at 10:00 a.m. today. They left the hospital together in a car heading to the Emerald Tower in downtown Bellevue. Unit 1502 stands in Serafina's mother's name, but HOA fees and utility bills for the past 6 months were paid by Sterling's assistant, the Emerald Tower. That was an ultra-luxury high-rise, far more expensive than our marital estate. Sterling certainly spared no expense for his good friend. But where did that money come from? Perhaps it included contributions from my trust fund? I saved the address and the blurry surveillance photos, filing them away with all the evidence I had gathered. Walking out of the club, the Maybach was still waiting. Sitting in the back, watching the scenery blur past, I felt the sheltered, naive Harper Kensington who believed love was everything dying rapidly, replaced by a cold-hearted, goal-oriented avenger. Back at the estate, Martha came out to greet me, looking worried. "Ma'am, Mr. Vance called on the landline just now." I stopped. "What did he say?" Martha carefully watched my face. "He asked if you were home, how your mood was. He said he'd be home late, and told you to stop making a fuss, and that he'd deal with it when he gets back." "Late." "How late?" I sneered. "He didn't give a specific time." "He sounded very tired," Martha reported truthfully. But there wasn't a shred of remorse. "I know," I walked straight upstairs. "If he calls back, just tell him I'm asleep or out, whatever. You don't need to give him any updates on me." "Yes, ma'am." I went into the study, booted up my laptop, and began meticulously studying the documents Julian's assistant had sent, including the events I'd have to attend over the next 2 years, and basic details about the Thorne family. Since this was a transaction, I had to prepare thoroughly for my end of the deal. Time passed in a blur of frantic preparation and waiting. Night fell. Sterling didn't come home. I didn't wait. I knew he was probably at the Emerald Tower with Serafina, who had just escaped her tragedy, comforting her panicked state, and casually complaining about his unreasonable former bride. Meanwhile, I was counting down the liquidation of my assets, memorizing my new identity, and waiting to become another man's wife tomorrow. We were both speeding down our own paths, just in entirely opposite directions. Before sleeping, I checked my phone one last time. The screen showed the finalized digital contract for the Seattle penthouse, sent by Julian's assistant. Alongside the confirmed itinerary for tomorrow, I turned off the screen and lay in the dark. The era of Harper Kensington was closing. The opening act for Mrs. Thorne's revenge would officially begin on day 3, 8:29 a.m. I stood in front of the mirror in the guest suite, adjusting my minimalist light gray knit dress. The premium fabric highlighted my pale, cool skin. My long hair was pinned up with a pearl clip. My makeup was lighter than yesterday's, hiding the lingering exhaustion and leaving only a calm, almost emotionless facade. The woman in the mirror had clear but deep eyes. There was no sadness from the bride of 2 days ago, nor any hope for the future marriage. Just a cold, predetermined resolve. Downstairs, the faint sound of a car engine shutting off broke the silence. 8:30 a.m., right on the dot. I picked up the sealed envelope containing Vivian Hayes' original ID documents. I took one last look at the temporary room I had occupied for less than 48 hours, turned around, and walked down the stairs without a shred of nostalgia. Martha was waiting by the door holding my simple but spacious duffel bag, which contained only a few essential personal items and basic clothes. Everything else, Julian's assistant had assured me, was fully stocked at my new residence. I didn't need to bring anything tied to my past. "Ma'am," Martha's voice trembled slightly, her eyes full of reluctance and worry. I took the bag and gently patted her hand, my voice calm. "Martha, keep an eye on this place for me. If Sterling comes back, you know what to say. I'll contact you later." Martha nodded vigorously, her eyes red. "Don't worry, ma'am. I know exactly what to do." I said nothing more, opened the door, and stepped out. The car waiting wasn't yesterday's Maybach, but a much more discreet black Audi. The same driver silently opened the trunk, loaded my bag, and opened the door for me. The car left the estate, merging into the morning traffic. I watched the villa shrink in the rearview mirror, my heart entirely indifferent. That place had buried Harper's last bit of naive hope for love, and now it would bury the fake shell of the Vance family. The marriage registration process was simpler and faster than I expected. At a county clerk's office in a district completely unfamiliar to me, Julian Thorne was already waiting. He had changed into a more formal black suit. Seeing me, he gave a barely perceptible nod, offering no greeting. We were like two business partners arriving to finalize a major deal. Under the curious yet professional gaze of the clerk, we filled out the forms, signed our names, and took the photo. While taking the picture, the photographer tried to lighten the mood. "Get a little closer, you two. Smile. This is a happy occasion." Julian's hand lightly rested behind my back, not actually touching me. I obliged, curving my lips slightly, my eyes staring calmly into the lens, not looking at him. The flash went off, freezing the moment. We probably looked like the perfect couple, but our eyes lacked the warmth newlyweds should have. There was only a tacit, distant understanding. The stamp came down. 2 marriage certificates were pushed toward us. I took mine and opened it. Next to the photo, 2 names were printed side by side. Julian Thorne, Vivian Hayes. Vivian Hayes. I traced the name with my finger. From today on, at least legally and socially, Harper Kensington had to step back. "My assistant will take you back," Julian said, pocketing his certificate, his tone as cold as if discussing a quarterly report. "You can follow your plan and handle your personal affairs. When you're done, he'll bring you to my place. Here's the address and access card." He handed me a black key card and a slip of paper. "Thank you." I took it and put it in my purse. "Unnecessary," he said softly. His eyes lingered on my face for a moment, as if wanting to say something, but ultimately he just raised his wrist to check his expensive watch. "I have meetings all day. If everything goes smoothly, we can have dinner tonight and discuss the next steps." This was likely part of the maintaining dignity clause in the agreement. I nodded. "All right." He turned and left, his stride brisk and purposeful, devoid of any newlywed lingering. This was exactly what I needed. When the assistant brought me back to the Mercer Island estate, it was past 11:00 a.m. Seeing me, Martha visibly breathed a sigh of relief, then lowered her voice anxiously. "Ma'am, Mr. Vance called half an hour ago. When he heard you weren't home, he was very unhappy. He said to have you call him back immediately." "Ignore him." I set down the envelope containing Vivian Hayes and the key card, changing into comfortable loungewear as if I had just returned from a normal errand. "If he calls back, tell him I'm feeling unwell, resting, and not taking calls. I really did need to rest." The constant emotional drain and tension made me slightly dizzy. I took a vitamin, drank some water, and forced myself to nap. In the afternoon, I processed emails and received remote updates from Julian's assistant. 2 more properties had cleared their deposits, the funds moving exactly as planned. As twilight fell, the familiar roar of a car engine echoed outside the estate. Sterling's flashy silver Porsche had finally arrived. I didn't move, staying seated on the living room sofa, holding a magazine but reading absolutely nothing. My heart beat steadily, no racing, no panic. Just the cold patience of a hunter waiting for the prey to step into the trap. The sound of keys turning in the lock was accompanied by an impatient roughness. The door swung open, and Sterling walked in. He looked exhausted, faint dark circles under his eyes, still wearing the suit from the wedding 2 days ago, though much more wrinkled. His collar was unbuttoned, his hair unkempt. Yet, even so, his familiar, arrogant, annoyed expression hadn't changed at all. Seeing me sitting calmly in the living room, he was visibly startled, clearly not expecting me to be so composed. He immediately frowned, tossed his jacket onto a chair, and spoke in a tone that faked gentleness but dripped with blame. "Harper, why didn't you answer my calls? Do you know how worried I was these past 2 days?" "Worried?" "Worried about Serafina, more likely." I sneered internally, but outwardly I just glanced up at him coldly, remaining silent. My silence seemed to anger him. He took a few steps to the sofa opposite mine, sat down, and tried to assume his usual "we need to talk seriously" posture. "Harper, the wedding was a poorly handled situation. I'll admit that." His tone wasn't sincere. It sounded like he was addressing an annoying technicality. But Serafina's situation was critical. It was life or death. "You've always been gentle. You can understand that, right?" He was forcing the label of kind and understanding onto me, trying to guilt me, a familiar tactic. I stayed silent, just quietly watching him perform. Seeing me ignore him, his frown deepened, his voice growing agitated. "How long are you going to keep this up? Do you know what the rumors are saying out there? Do you know how much this impacts our family's businesses? My parents, your parents, everyone is under a lot of pressure." He escalated the issue to family interests and parental pressure, trying to use authority to suppress me. I still said nothing, even taking a sip of my cold tea. Sterling finally lost it. He jumped up, paced around the living room, then turned back to me, his voice taking on a patronizing, compromising tone. "Fine. I know you were wronged. How about this? I promise you. In a few days, when things quiet down, we'll redo the wedding. Same venue, same guests, all the traditions, nothing left out. Then we'll go to City Hall and register. Let's just put this behind us, okay?" He paused, seemingly remembering something, and added with a trace of self-righteous responsibility. "And don't worry about Serafina. I'll make it clear to her. She's just a friend. I'll keep my distance from now on. You are my official wife. We'll redo the wedding. We'll register." I almost laughed out loud. He thought that after abandoning me, turning me and my family into a laughingstock, all he had to do was drop a casual makeup for it, and I would cry tears of gratitude, happily put on a wedding dress again, and continue dreaming of being Mrs. Vance, using my trust fund to support him and his good friend? Did he think I sat here for 2 days naively waiting for him to change his mind, just throwing a tantrum that needed coaxing? An immense sense of absurdity washed over me, followed by a chilling, rising thrill of disgust and satisfaction. Martha hadn't found an opening to speak yet, or perhaps Sterling simply hadn't given her one. From the moment he walked in, he was lost in his own script, the reluctant but responsible husband coming home to coax his unreasonable wife. I set the teacup down. The porcelain clinked sharply against the glass table. The sound seemed to snap Sterling out of his monologue. He looked at me, finally noticing the abnormality in my eyes. It wasn't resentment or anger. It was a calm, mocking look that made his blood run cold. At that moment, Martha, who had been standing silently near the dining room, stepped forward. Her face was completely devoid of emotion. She looked at Sterling and spoke in the rigid, perfectly trained tone of a veteran housekeeper. "Mr. Vance, I'm afraid the madam cannot redo the wedding with you, nor can she register a marriage with you." Sterling froze, seemingly unable to comprehend why this usually obedient housekeeper was suddenly interrupting, let alone with that tone. He reflexively snapped, "Martha, this doesn't concern you. Get out." Martha didn't move. She continued in that flat, sentencing tone, because 2 days ago, the madam already married someone else. Her voice wasn't loud, but it struck Sterling like lightning. He stood completely dumbfounded. His expression instantly froze, shifting from patronizing generosity to pure, unadulterated confusion. "What? What did you say?" Sterling's voice was hoarse, caught in his throat. He whipped his head toward Martha, his gaze fierce but hiding a trace of panic. "Martha, what kind of garbage are you spouting? Say one more word and you're fired." He tried to use his anger and authority as the master of the house to crush this sudden, absurd accusation. But Martha acted as if she hadn't heard his threat. She stood straight, her expression unwavering. She lowered her eyes, avoiding his murderous glare, but her words grew clearer and colder. I am not speaking garbage. Mr. Vance, the madam went to City Hall to register her marriage yesterday afternoon. I saw the certificate myself. Martha's voice was as calm as if reciting the dinner menu. The gentleman's name is Thorne. Mr. Julian Thorne. Julian Thorne. Sterling reflexively repeated the name. His brows tied into a knot. The name sounded familiar, but the sheer shock and absurdity of the moment short-circuited his brain. He suddenly whipped his head back to me, his eyes brimming with disbelief and the furious fire of betrayal. Harper, what the hell is going on? You secretly married someone else without telling me? Are you insane? Or is this old bat crazy, just making things up? He finally aimed his crosshairs at me. I slowly put down my magazine, looked up, and met his furious, shocked gaze. A very faint smile, almost resembling pity, appeared on my face. Martha isn't making things up, I said, my voice as casual as if discussing an objective fact that had nothing to do with me. I really did get married. Legally speaking, I am currently Mrs. Thorne. So, Mr. Vance, redoing the wedding, or registering with you is, I'm afraid, no longer appropriate. I heavily emphasized Mr. Vance, drawing a clear, distinct line. Sterling recoiled as if the words had burned him. The blood drained entirely from his face. He stared at me as if seeing me for the very first time. Anger, humiliation, shock, and a vague, creeping dread tangled together on his face. You dare? He took a step forward, looking as though he wanted to grab my shoulders and interrogate me, but his hands stopped midway, perhaps deterred by my undisguised, freezing glare. He swung his arms wildly, his voice pitching high with agitation. Harper Kensington, we haven't even divorced. What you're doing is bigamy. It's illegal. I can sue you and drag your name through the mud. He grasped for his last straw, trying to use the law to intimidate me. Unfortunately, the straw was imaginary. We never registered. Where would a divorce come from? I slightly furrowed my brows, injecting just the right amount of mock confusion into my voice, reminding him of the simplest fact. Mr. Vance, you ran away on our wedding day. Prior to that, we never went to the county clerk's office. Legally, we never established a marital relationship. I simply ended a romantic relationship and then started a new marriage. Is there a problem? Sterling opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face shifted from pale to a sickly green, his body swaying slightly. Only now did it hit him. The legal weapon he proudly thought he could use to control me never existed in the first place. His fleeing from the wedding wasn't just missing a ceremony. It was throwing away the only chance to create a legal bond between us. An immense sense of absurdity and the fury of being utterly played consumed him. Great. Harper, you are really something. He gnashed his teeth, his chest heaving violently. Climbing the social ladder, huh? The Thorne family? Which Thorne family? Why haven't I heard of them? You just wanted to piss me off, so you grabbed some random guy off the street, didn't you? He began spewing nonsense, degrading and speculating, desperately trying to scrape back some pathetic psychological high ground. At that moment, Martha spoke again, her tone brutally flat, delivering the second stab. Mr. Julian Thorne is the founding partner of Apex Capital and the current head of the Thorne family. That South Lake Union Tech Hub project Vance Corporation tried so desperately to get a piece of last year, the lead investor is Apex Capital. Apex Capital. Julian Thorne. Sterling mumbled the names, his face completely devoid of color. He finally remembered. The man was so low profile he only occasionally appeared on the covers of financial magazines, yet he controlled terrifying amounts of capital and resources. A man even his father, Chairman Vance, spoke of with deep reverence. A man they couldn't even manage to network with. Harper Kensington ended up marrying Julian Thorne. This fact terrified and humiliated him far more than if I had married some random guy. Just seconds ago, he was using words like random guy to degrade my new husband. No, impossible. He shook his head, refusing to process the information, his panicked eyes darting between Martha and me. You're both lying to me. Harper, how could you possibly know someone like Julian Thorne? Or did you get scammed? He would rather believe I was scammed than accept the truth that, after leaving him, I instantly married a Titan leagues above the Vance family. I didn't answer him, just leisurely watched the first signs of total collapse appear on his face. Martha, ever the dedicated housekeeper, delivered the third and final, fatal stab. She took a small breath, as if preparing to announce a heavy truth she had practiced for a long time. "Mr. Vance," the madam asked me to pass a message. She paused, ensuring Sterling's attention was entirely on her. "Those 8 luxury investment properties in the madam's name, the ones you constantly valued, the ones you repeatedly suggested using as bank collateral to leverage funding and maintain cash flow for your company's green tech project. Those 8 properties." Sterling's head snapped up, his eyes nailed to Martha. A terrible premonition, far more violent than the news of my remarriage, gripped his heart. Those 8 properties were the most crucial link in Vance Corp's plan to survive their financial crisis. I had always refused to sign over full power of attorney, but he believed that once he coaxed me and we married, they would become joint assets. He always thought he had a way to manipulate those properties. "What about them?" His voice was audibly shaking. Martha declared clearly, word by word. Before her marriage, the madam authorized a specialized firm to liquidate all 8 properties for cash. Currently, all transaction processes have been initiated. The funds for the fastest sales have already been completely transferred. What? Sold? Sterling looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His vision went dark, and he staggered back a step, nearly crashing into the coffee table behind him. He braced his hands on the back of the sofa, his knuckles white from the strain, his voice hoarse. "Sold completely? Who gave her permission to sell? Yes, they were her properties, but we were about to get married. That was too. That was to fill the bottomless pit of a project you were using to save the Vance family, right?" I finally spoke, cutting through his chaotic yelling. My voice was calm, but it pierced through his last shred of cover like an ice drill. "Sterling Vance, did you really think I didn't know? Half the reason you pursued me so aggressively was because the Kensington's network could help your family expand. The other half was because you had your eyes on those 8 properties, high-quality assets that could be liquidated at any moment." I stood up and walked right up to him, stopping just close enough for him to clearly see my cold, emotionless eyes. "Before the wedding, you probed indirectly. You even brought drafted power of attorney documents for me to sign. Weren't you just waiting to finish the wedding so you could immediately mortgage the properties, take the cash, and plug the gaping hole in your failing project caused by your own mismanagement and flawed decisions?" Sterling's face was beyond ugly now. It was a twisted mix of fear, despair, confusion, humiliation, and the sheer terror of having his final, desperate plan stripped bare. His lips trembled, wanting to argue, but he found he couldn't form a single word, because everything I said was the absolute truth. "What a pity," I sighed softly, as if truly feeling sorry for him, though my eyes held nothing but icy mockery. "You calculated so perfectly, but you forgot I'm not a puppet you can control at will. The moment you left me at the altar to run to Serafina, you personally cut off your last lifeline. Now, the properties are sold, the money is in my pocket. Oh no, it's in the joint accounts of my husband Julian Thorne and me. It doesn't have a single cent to do with your family. You, Sterling pointed at me, his hand shaking violently. A massive, crushing panic finally swallowed him whole. The properties were gone. The expected bailout funds were gone. He knew better than anyone what that meant. The Vance project had swallowed massive investments, relying entirely on the next injection of cash flow to stay afloat. If the capital chain broke, he suddenly grabbed at his last imaginary lifeline, almost screaming, "The project! Harper, your family invested in that project too. Your father signed a letter of intent. If I go down, the Kensingtons will take a massive hit." "Oh, that?" I casually smoothed my sleeve. "Forgot to tell you. My father officially sent a letter to Vance Corp yesterday. Citing severe doubts about the integrity and execution capabilities of the partner, he withdrew all investment intentions and reserved the right to sue for the reputational damage your wedding stunt caused the Kensingtons. Losses? Sure, we'll lose some initial sunk costs, but compared to being dragged into the mud with you and losing everything, the Kensingtons can comfortably absorb that price." The final lifeline sank. Sterling stood frozen. The muscles in his face twitched uncontrollably. His eyes were hollow, as if his soul and energy had been sucked out. Cold sweat ran down his pale forehead. Martha watched his soulless demeanor and delivered the final sentence the summary Julian's assistant had specifically requested be conveyed. "Therefore, Mr. Vance, the madam asked me to give you a final message." Due to your severe breach of trust leading to the failure of the marriage, the Kensingtons have withdrawn their capital. The madam's assets have been fully liquidated and detached from you. The core guarantees for the financial contracts you previously relied on to stay afloat no longer exist. Calls from banks and debt collectors will flood your and Chairman Vance's phones by tonight at the earliest, tomorrow at the latest. She bowed slightly, delivering the cruelest words in the most formal posture. Simply put, Mr. Vance, you and Vance Corporation are bankrupt. Bankrupt. Those two words echoed like a death knell in the empty living room. Sterling's legs gave out. With a heavy thud, he collapsed onto the rug. He looked up at me, standing before him with a cold, condescending expression, then at the emotionless Martha. He finally, completely understood. This wasn't a joke. It wasn't a threat. It was a meticulously planned, rapidly executed, and fully completed destruction. And I, the woman he thought he could easily control, the fiancé he thought he could easily coax back after hurting her, was one of the prime architects of this destruction. The look in his eyes shifted from anger and shock to absolute, bone-deep terror and bewildered panic. I looked at his disheveled state. My heart didn't even ripple. It was just filled with a freezing calm. The first half of the betraying couple's play was over. I bent down, picked up my phone and the purse containing the keycard from the coffee table, and said to Martha, "I leave this place to you, Martha. My husband is still waiting for me." Then, without looking back at Sterling crumpled on the floor, I walked straight for the door. Behind me came Sterling's hoarse, guttural roar, like a beast backed into a corner. "Harper Kensington! You are so cruel. Just you wait, wait." I slightly curled my lips into a thin smile. "Of course I'll wait. I'll wait to see how you and your precious Serafina tear each other apart in this swamp of bankruptcy, sinking together into endless misery." Stepping out of the estate gates, the chilly late autumn evening wind hit my face, making me feel incredibly alert. The nauseating aura of the house behind me seemed to blow away. The driver assigned by Julian, and the black Audi, were quietly waiting in the same spot. I opened the door, got in, and gave the address Julian's assistant had provided. The car pulled away from the lakefront neighborhood that once held my fake fantasies. I never looked back. My new residence was across the city, a famous luxury downtown penthouse known for its strict security and absolute privacy. I swiped the keycard to enter the private elevator, going straight to the top floor. The front door used a fingerprint and passcode combination. My information had clearly been pre-entered. The door slid open soundlessly. Before me was a modern, incredibly spacious, and cold space. Minimalist design, dominated by black, white, and gray. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the sparkling Seattle skyline. The furniture was expensive but lacked the breath of life, feeling more like a refined showroom or a temporary staging ground than a warm home. But for me, it was perfect. A clean, fresh base camp, completely severed from the past. My luggage, the duffel bag, had been brought up earlier and placed in the corner of the living room. I walked over and unzipped it. Inside were only a few items that belonged to Harper Kensington. I took out some clothes and toiletries and walked into the guest bedroom next to the master suite. The master suite was clearly Julian's territory. I wouldn't cross boundaries. The guest room was also minimalist, but the bedding was soft and the amenities complete. I quickly unpacked, washed my face, and looked at the calm woman in the mirror. I let out a soft breath. This would be my nominal home for the next 2 years. My phone vibrated. A text from Julian Thorne, brief and clear. Arrived? Dinner at 7:30. I had the chef prep ahead. "We'll discuss the next steps while we eat," I replied. "Understood." At 7:25 p.m., I walked out of the guest room. A middle-aged woman, in an apron, smiling warmly, was bustling in the open kitchen. The air smelled of delicious food. Seeing me, she bowed respectfully. "Ma'am, Mr. Thorne said dinner will be ready momentarily. Please wait a moment." I nodded and sat at the massive dining table. The long table could seat 10, but only 2 exquisite place settings were arranged, sitting far apart. At exactly 7:30, the front door clicked open. Julian Thorne was home. He took off his suit jacket. Underneath, his crisp white dress shirt had the sleeves rolled up slightly, revealing strong forearms and a luxury watch. Seeing me, he gave a faint nod as a greeting, then walked straight toward the master bedroom, likely to change. Minutes later, he emerged in dark gray loungewear. His aura was less sharp than during the day, but the distance remained. He sat at the head of the table opposite me, and the cook began serving. The food was exquisite, portions small, presentation meticulous. We started eating in silence, accompanied only by the soft clinking of silverware. The atmosphere couldn't be called warm, perhaps even a bit stiff, but we both tacitly maintained this superficial peace. Halfway through the meal, Julian broke the silence, getting straight to the point. How did Sterling Vance react? I put down my knife and fork, wiped the corner of my mouth with a napkin, and calmly recounted the events. Just as you predicted. First shock, then anger, denial, and finally fear. Martha relayed all the information. He collapsed on the floor, seemingly quite devastated. Julian let out a faint, seemingly unsurprised, perhaps even a bit bored by the outcome. He cut the cod on his plate with elegant movements. The final step of severing the capital will complete tomorrow morning. At that time, Vance Corp's major creditors will simultaneously receive risk alerts. The bankruptcy liquidation process will initiate by tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. His efficiency was terrifyingly high. What do I need to do? I asked. For now, you don't need to do anything directly. Julian looked up at me. Right now, you are Mrs. Thorne, a Mrs. Thorne doesn't need to dirty her own hands to step on an ant. I will handle public opinion and the business side. You just need to appear at the right time, in the right place, showing everyone you are living very well. That is enough. He paused, then added, Of course, if you have a specific interest, like wanting to personally witness the end of certain people, as long as it doesn't affect the overall plan or our public dignity, I can arrange it. I understood his meaning. He needed a rational partner who could play the role of Mrs. Thorne well, not a blindly vengeful woman throwing herself into the fray. This aligned perfectly with my intentions. I understand, I said. Thank you. No need. His tone remained indifferent. We each get what we need. Dinner ended in a slightly gloomy atmosphere, but with clear objectives. Julian went to his study to work, while I returned to my room. I checked in with his assistant on the final property sales and began reviewing the upcoming social events the assistant had forwarded to me. Some were events we might need to attend together. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the never-ending hum of the massive city, I surprisingly didn't suffer from insomnia. Instead, I quickly fell asleep, perhaps because the burden in my heart had lightened, or perhaps knowing the wheels of revenge were turning unstoppably, brought a sense of exhausted closure. When I woke up the next morning, Julian was already gone. The cook had prepared breakfast and told me that per Mr. Thorne's instructions, if I wanted to return to the estate to grab anything, the driver was available at any time. I thought about it. I did have some personal books and documents left there. Though not many, it was best to retrieve them. Subconsciously, I also wanted to see what the place looked like after Sterling left, and check on Martha. Around 10:00 a.m., I had the driver take me back to the lakefront estate. As the car pulled up to the gates, I immediately sensed something was off. Parked out front was a loud, hot pink Mini Cooper I had never seen before. It wasn't Sterling's, wasn't from the Kensingtons, and didn't belong to any friend I knew. My heart twitched with a premonition. I punched in the code, opened the door, stepped into the foyer, and immediately heard a familiar, nauseating voice coming from inside. It was Sweet, bossing people around like the lady of the house. Ugh, this vase is totally in the way here. Martha, take it to the storage room. And this rug, the color is too dark. Sterling prefers lighter colors. Change it out sometime. Serafina. I stopped, a cold sneer pulling at the corners of my mouth. Perfect timing. I changed into slippers, intentionally stomped my feet loudly, and walked into the living room. Serafina was standing with her back to me, facing the wall where the wedding portrait used to hang, her finger pointing in the air as if redesigning the empty space. She was wearing a pristine white Chanel tweed suit, her hair elaborately styled, her makeup flawless. She looked incredibly radiant, nothing like someone who had a cranial hemorrhage or was in critical condition. Martha was standing to the side holding the vase, looking tense. Seeing me walk in, her eyes lit up, and she quickly bowed her head. Ma'am. This time, the title rang out clearly, impossible to misunderstand. Hearing the noise, Serafina quickly turned around and saw me. Shock, jealousy, and a rapidly summoned fake surprise flashed across her face. She quickly adjusted her expression, even pulling off a weak, innocent, and fragile smile, and took 2 steps toward me. Harper, what are you doing here? She spoke intimately, as if we were truly best friends. I was just about to tidy up. Sterling said I'll be living here from now on. I don't really like some of the decor. Oh, right, I haven't officially congratulated you yet. I heard you already found someone new. That was fast. Her words were dripping with undisguised sarcasm. I looked at her, not rushing to speak. I slowly walked to the sofa in the center of the living room, sat down leisurely, and finally looked up. My calm gaze swept over her, landing on her face. Miss Croft, I spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it made the fake smile freeze on her face. This property is in my name. Although I paid the down payment, I don't recall authorizing Sterling Vance or you to dispose of any items here, much less alter the decor. Serafina's face shifted slightly, but she quickly lifted her chin. She pulled a black credit card out of her limited edition designer handbag and waved it at me. Her tone was boastful and slightly provocative. Harper, that's not the right way to put it. Sterling said, this is our home now. He just got me this card. No limit. He said I can decorate however I want, buy whatever I want. After all, I am his official girlfriend now, and soon, I'll be Mrs. Vance. She specifically emphasized official and Mrs. Vance. I looked at the corporate executive black card in her hand and laughed coldly inside. Sterling really was generous, not forgetting to use his last drop of credit to paint a grand illusion for his mistress on the eve of his bankruptcy. Is that so? I smiled faintly, the smile not reaching my eyes. Then Miss Croft better enjoy it while she can. Even a no-limit card requires the account behind it to have sufficient funds to pay the bill, right? Serafina frowned, seemingly not grasping the implication, or simply refusing to believe Vance Corp could collapse. She pouted, about to say something else. When the doorbell rang, Martha looked at me. I gave a slight nod. She put the vase down and went to open the door. Two people stood outside. One was lawyer Carmichael, a senior partner at the firm I had hired to sell the properties, holding a thick stack of folders. The other was Assistant Reed, sent by Julian Thorne to help me process my identity and asset transfers, carrying a professional briefcase. Seeing the situation inside, especially Serafina, they were slightly taken aback, but their professionalism quickly took over. Lawyer Carmichael walked in first, bowing respectfully to me. Miss Kensington, per your authorization and Mr. Thorne's arrangements, your final property, the estate in Lake Tahoe, has completed all legal and financial transfers. These are the final documents requiring your signature. Additionally, the draft for transferring a portion of the funds to the Dawn Women's Startup Foundation is ready for your review. Assistant Reed stepped forward, his voice clear and calm. Mrs. Thorne, Mr. Thorne asked me to bring your new identification documents, passport, and necessary asset proofs. Furthermore, the premarital jewelry and share certificates you mentioned wanting to process are in the safe here. I brought a specialized security box and the inventory list. We can complete the transfer and seal them today. As they spoke, every word they dropped radiated the undeniable weight of massive wealth and power. Serafina stood frozen. Hearing phrases like final property transaction complete, funds to the foundation, new identification, jewelry, and shares transfer, the arrogant, smug expression on her face slowly hardened and shattered. She looked at the legal documents in Lawyer Carmichael's hands, complete with bright red seals. She looked at the secure briefcase in Assistant Reed's hand, clearly holding immense value. Then, she looked down at the flimsy, supplementary credit card in her own hand. Paired with the fact that this estate, the one Sterling supposedly gave her, legally belonged to me, an overwhelming, indescribable humiliation and panic silently swallowed her. She wasn't stupid. The scene before her, my calm demeanor, and the respectful attitudes of these two elite professionals created an incredibly stark contrast. This was absolutely not the aura of a woman who had been dumped or scammed. I took the pen from Lawyer Carmichael and decisively signed Harper Kensington on several documents. Some legal papers still required my old identity. Then I turned to Assistant Reed. Please oversee the transfer of the jewelry and documents. Strictly follow the inventory protocol. Yes, Mrs. Thorne. Assistant Reed bowed. I suddenly acted as if I just remembered Serafina was still there. I looked up at her, my tone flat and waveless. Miss Croft, as you can see, I have important business to handle. As for the decor of this house, I'm afraid you'll have to discuss it directly with the owner, which is me. However, my personal advice to you is this. Before Sterling Vance clearly explains his financial situation to you, you might want to be careful using that no-limit card. After all, if you max it out and it can't be paid, your own credit will be ruined, won't it? Serafina's face finally drained of all color. She gripped the card so tightly, her knuckles turned white, her lips trembled. She looked at me, then at the two intimidating professionals. Finally, unable to form a complete sentence, she stomped her foot, scrambled to grab her purse, and practically fled out the front door. The engine of the hot pink Mini Cooper roared to life and sped off in a panic. I watched the direction she disappeared in, took the glass of warm water Martha handed me, and took a sip. Seeing is always more impactful than hearing, isn't it, Miss Croft? And this is just the beginning. After Serafina fled, the estate returned to silence. Lawyer Carmichael and Assistant Reed efficiently completed the inventory, sealing, and transferring of the items. Martha quietly helped me pack some personal books, photo albums, mostly family photos. Anything with Sterling had been trashed, and a few small mementos. Looking at the neatly packed boxes, I realized I was truly leaving this place for good. It had once housed my naive fantasies of marriage and the future. Now, the illusions were shattered, leaving only a mess to clean up and a hardened heart. Ma'am, should these boxes be sent directly to your new residence, or placed in storage for now? Assistant Reed asked. Send them straight there, I said. Thank you. Of course. By the time everything was handled, it was nearly noon. I had the driver take Assistant Reed and Lawyer Carmichael back first, then turned to Martha. Martha, this house won't be mine for much longer. Soon, people might come to lock it down, or appraise it. I hesitated. Do you want to stay here? Or come with me? Or I can arrange another place for you. Martha didn't hesitate. She untied her apron, her voice firm. Ma'am, I'll go with you. Wherever you go, I'll follow. There's nothing left for me in this house. My heart warmed. I nodded. All right, pack your personal things. I'll have the assistant arrange for you to move over in a couple of days. Before leaving the estate, I took one last look at the cold, empty space. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting sharp streaks of light across the floor, illuminating dancing dust motes. This place had witnessed betrayal, heartbreak, and injustice, but it also marked my decisive break and new beginning. Enough. Time to go back to Julian Thorne's penthouse. Life seemed to fall into a strange, new rhythm. Julian Thorne was incredibly busy, leaving early and returning late. We rarely saw each other. Communication was limited to necessary business updates. His original cook handled the meals and deep cleaning, while Martha took over daily tidying. Our lives were ordered, completely non-intrusive. I began utilizing the resources Julian provided, diving into areas I had never deeply explored before: family trust funds, charity operations, and even auditing non-confidential business meetings handled by his assistant. I needed to grow rapidly, not just for revenge, but to prepare for a completely clean start 2 years from now. News about the Vance family began to erupt exactly as Julian predicted. First, Vance Corporation issued an emergency trading halt, citing undisclosed major events. Soon after, financial media outlets broke the news that Vance Corp's capital chain had snapped. Multiple banks and trust companies filed lawsuits demanding asset preservation. The highly anticipated green tech project was exposed as having fatal technical flaws and massive financial fraud, completely collapsing. Sterling's father, Chairman Vance, seemed to age 10 years overnight, photographed outside the courthouse looking completely lost. As for Sterling himself, he seemingly vanished from the face of the earth, absent from all social circles. Occasional rumors said he was desperately trying to sell his sports cars and private collections to raise cash, but it was a drop in the bucket. His relationship with Serafina also seemed fractured. People saw them screaming at each other outside a high-end restaurant. Serafina had cried her makeup off before turning and storming away. I read most of this in the brief reports Julian's assistant sent me. Cold, objective, emotionless. Scanning them, I didn't feel much gloating, just a dull sense of inevitability. Their current panic was simply the natural consequence of the rotten seeds they had planted. One evening, a few days later, Julian came home unusually early and informed me that tonight, there was a charity auction hosted by a local philanthropic society, attended by many prominent families. I needed to accompany him as his date. This will be your first public appearance as Mrs. Thorne, he said calmly, though the implication was clear. You don't need to try too hard. Just maintain a polite demeanor and stay by my side. We might run into some familiar faces or hear some gossip. I understand, I replied. This was my debut after marrying Julian. The news of the Vance family's collapse had spread, and my feud with Sterling was undoubtedly the hottest topic among the elite. Tonight, hundreds of eyes would be on me probing, guessing, judging. What should I wear? There are gowns and accessories prepared in the walk-in closet. Choose whatever you like. Julian paused, then added, pick whatever makes you feel comfortable and powerful enough to command the room. I followed his instructions and walked into a closet that rivaled a high-end boutique. It was filled with haute couture gowns and fine jewelry. I chose a deep emerald green velvet gown. The design was relatively conservative, but the fabric and color radiated a strong, commanding aura. For accessories, I wore simple diamond drop earrings and a matching ring. My makeup focused on sharp eyeliner and a bold lip, calm and authoritative. When I stepped out, Julian was waiting in the living room. He had changed into a formal tuxedo, looking effortlessly striking. His eyes landed on me, a clear flash of approval in them. He nodded slightly. You look perfect. No extravagant compliments, but that was enough. We didn't need flowery lies. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of downtown's most luxurious hotel. Crystal chandeliers glittered, the room packed with the city's political and business elite. When Julian and I appeared at the entrance together, the noisy room fell into a brief, subtle silence. Hundreds of eyes instantly locked onto us, shocked, curious, probing, understanding, and even slightly fearful. Complex emotions silently tangled in the air. Julian's expression didn't change. I rested my hand firmly on his arm, and we walked smoothly into the hall. He occasionally nodded to acquaintances. They immediately smiled back, though their eyes couldn't help but dart toward me. I could feel the weight of those stares, but I kept my chin slightly raised, wearing a perfectly measured, distant smile. My calm gaze swept over the crowd as if their whispers and scrutiny had nothing to do with me. Julian whispered in my ear, introducing key figures I needed to greet. I engaged them flawlessly, my posture elegant, my words measured. Very quickly, the probing eyes shifted, replaced by caution and grudging respect. Julian Thorne's new wife might have a controversial background, but her poise and aura tonight proved she was not to be underestimated. The auction began. We sat in reserved front-row seats. Julian raised his paddle a few times, acquiring 2 reasonably priced but meaningful art pieces to fulfill the charitable obligation. He barely spoke, but I could feel that his mere presence exerted an invisible pressure. Anyone intending to approach us to pry or mock hesitated and backed away. Halfway through the dinner, I got up to use the restroom to touch up my makeup. In the hallway, it was inevitable. I ran into 2 wealthy socialites I had met at previous events. Seeing me, their faces stiffened for a second before they plastered on unnatural smiles. Good evening, Mrs. Thorne. One tried bravely. I smiled and nodded. Good evening, Mrs. King, Mrs. Lee. After brief small talk about the weather and the auction items, Mrs. Lee couldn't hold back. Feigning concern, she asked, Mrs. Thorne, I heard about you and the Vance family. Ah, no one knows where Sterling Vance is these days. No news for days. It's quite worrying. Her tone dripped with thinly veiled schadenfreude and undisguised curiosity. I kept my smile, my voice gentle. Is that so? I wouldn't know. After all, I have absolutely no relationship with Mr. Vance anymore. Right now, I only care about my husband, Julian Thorne's business. I heavily emphasized my husband, Julian Thorne. The 2 women flushed, quickly agreeing. Yes, of course, Mr. Thorne is so young and successful. You are very fortunate, Mrs. Thorne. I didn't say anything else. I gave a slight nod and walked away. Behind me, I could hear their hushed whispers. She's so calm. Well, if you marry into the Thorne family, who cares about a bankrupt loser like Sterling? I ignored the gossip and slowly walked to the restroom. Touching up my makeup, I looked at the flawless, cold-eyed woman in the mirror, my heart completely still. The chatter of these nobodies couldn't hurt me in the slightest. The gala neared its end, and Julian and I prepared to leave. Stepping out of the hotel onto the red carpet, the night air was crisp, the lights dazzling. The driver had already pulled the car around. Just as we were about to step down the stairs, a figure lunged out from the shadows behind a dimly lit pillar, stumbling madly toward us. Hotel security reacted instantly, rushing forward, but the person ignored everything, violently shoving a guard aside. The guard seemed to recognize him and hesitated to use full force. Suddenly, the figure collapsed, falling to his knees right on the red carpet in front of Julian and me. Harper, please, I'm begging you, leave me a way out. A hoarse, sobbing, desperate plea echoed outside the quiet hotel. I stopped and looked down. Kneeling before me was Sterling Vance. He had lost every ounce of his former playboy charm. His hair was a greasy, matted mess sticking to his forehead. His eyes were sunken, his face covered in unkempt stubble. The dress shirt he wore was wrinkled, the collar stained black with dirt, and his suit jacket was nowhere to be found. He looked up at me. His face was as pale as paper, his lips cracked, his bloodshot eyes filled with absolute despair and begging. In just a few days, he had fallen this far. The guests leaving the hotel and the staff all stopped, staring in shock. Whispers erupted. Some sneakily raised their phones. Julian frowned imperceptibly. He took a half-step forward, smoothly positioning me slightly behind him. He stared coldly down at Sterling on the ground, saying nothing, but the invisible pressure made Sterling's pleas catch in his throat. Sterling seemed blind to Julian, or rather, in his eyes, there was only me. He kneeled, shuffling forward a few inches, reaching out as if to grab the hem of my gown, but didn't dare. He just kept bowing his head toward the ground, his voice pathetic. "Harper, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have left you at the wedding. I shouldn't have gotten involved with Serafina. I was possessed. I wronged you. Please, for the sake of our past, just say a word to Mr. Thorne. Ask him to stop squeezing me. The banks are taking my house, my cars. Creditors are blocking my door every day. My dad had a heart attack and is in the hospital. I really have nowhere left to go, Harper. Please, give me a way out." He babbled incoherently, snot and tears running down his face, degrading himself to the absolute bottom. This pathetic creature was entirely disconnected from the arrogant man who had ruthlessly abandoned me, or the entitled brat who sat in my living room demanding I redo our wedding. I watched him quietly, watched him throw away every shred of dignity for money, kneeling like a dog before the fiancé he once despised, begging for scraps. Deep down, any remaining ripples of the past settled into absolute stillness. So, when you strip away the shiny, romantic exterior, all that's left is a fragile, spineless, disgusting core. Julian finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable, freezing authority. "Mr. Vance, please get up. Harassing my wife in public is unbecoming." Sterling trembled all over. He looked at Julian with terror, but his will to survive, or rather, his desperation for money, overrode everything. He turned to Julian and bowed his head again. "Mr. Thorne, sir, I was blind. I deserve to die. Please, be the bigger person and let me go. Those projects, the pressure. Please, just raise your hand and let me off. If you spare me, I'll do anything." A flash of undisguised disgust crossed Julian's eyes. He ignored Sterling's begging and tilted his head toward me, his tone calm. "Mrs. Thorne, what do you think?" He was handing me the symbolic power to judge. It was a gesture, a sign of respect, at least on the surface. In an instant, every eye on the red carpet locked onto me. I held Julian's arm and looked down at Sterling groveling at my feet. The surroundings were so quiet you could hear the night wind rustling the hotel flags. I slowly opened my mouth. My tone was clear, flat, devoid of any fluctuation or pity, as if stating a fact that had nothing to do with me. "Sir, I think you have the wrong person." I slightly raised the hand resting on Julian's arm. The simple diamond ring on my ring finger glinted coldly under the lights. My husband's last name is Thorne. With that, I didn't spare another glance at Sterling's face, which instantly turned the color of dead ashes. Ignoring his ultimate, absolute despair, I gently gripped Julian's arm and offered a polite smile. "Let's go. It's windy out here." A faint, almost imperceptible gleam flashed in Julian's eyes. He nodded, firmly supported me, and we walked down the steps. Behind us, Sterling broke down into a hysterical, sobbing scream, followed by the sounds of a struggle as security rushed in and dragged him away. We didn't look back. We got into the car, sealing off everything outside. Julian was silent for a moment before suddenly saying, "Handled nicely." I knew he meant my phrasing "my husband's last name is Thorne," drawing the line while asserting my status, clean and decisive. "It's what had to be done," I said. The car rolled into the night. The flashing lights outside blurred past. I knew that what happened tonight would soon be the hottest gossip in elite circles. Sterling's complete collapse and my decisive, cold attitude would be recounted endlessly, but none of it mattered anymore. When you crush an ant, you don't need extra emotions. But when the ant is dead, shouldn't the flies buzzing around it be swatted too? Like the woman named Serafina Croft, who was still clutching that no-limit card and dreaming of becoming Mrs. Vance. The car drove smoothly. The neon lights were blinding, but they couldn't pierce the quiet interior of the vehicle. Julian closed his eyes to rest, as if the noisy drama outside the hotel never happened. I looked out the window. Sterling's tear-stained, desperate face flashed in my mind, then was quickly buried under layers of ice. His pathetic state was his own doing. I found even a drop of pity to be a waste. "Sterling Vance won't be able to bother you anymore," Julian suddenly spoke, eyes still closed. His voice was stark in the quiet car. His personal assets are entirely frozen. Besides that sports car and a few watches targeted by creditors, he has almost nothing left to his name. Once Vance Corp's bankruptcy liquidation begins, he'll shoulder massive personal debt. He likely won't ever stand back up in this lifetime. I let out a soft acknowledging the information. This was the expected outcome. However, Julian opened his eyes and turned to look at me. His gaze held a subtle, almost amused curiosity. That Miss Croft beside him doesn't seem to have fully grasped reality yet. Serafina Croft. My heart stirred. Right. The woman who dreamed of being Mrs. Vance, showing off her limitless supplementary card. When the Vance mountain crumbled, how would she react? Do we need to specifically monitor her? I asked. Julian leaned back in his seat, his tone casual. She's just a clown. But letting her drive the final nail into Sterling's coffin might be more entertaining than doing it ourselves. Someone has already guided her to discover a few truths. I understood. What would destroy Sterling wasn't just our capital withdrawal and market pressure, but the process of being betrayed by his friends, being stabbed in the back by the person he trusted and loved the most. That would be the most absolute humiliation and destruction. I'm looking forward to it, I said softly, the corners of my mouth curving into a smile devoid of any warmth. The next 2 days passed peacefully. I followed Assistant Reed's schedule, trying on new gowns in preparation for a more important family gala coming up. I also began working with a charitable foundation owned by Apex Capital, focusing on women's education and startups. Julian seemed intent on slowly integrating me into some nominal management roles, both fitting for the image of Mrs. Thorne and helping me build experience for my independent future. Though busy, when Julian occasionally taught me how to handle business situations and social networking, he displayed a rare patience. A strange peace formed between us, non-interfering, yet cooperative. But that peace was quickly broken. It was the weekend. I was in the penthouse study on a video call with a foundation project manager. Martha walked in, looking uneasy, holding the intercom. "Ma'am." She lowered her voice, her tone tense and disgusted. "The lobby security just called. They said a group of people claiming to be your relatives are making a scene at the front gates, demanding to see you. Security won't let them in, so they're just standing there screaming, causing a terrible scene." Relatives? I frowned. My Kensington relatives knew my current situation. Unless it was an absolute emergency, they would never show up unannounced, let alone cause a scene at Julian Thorne's residence. There was only one answer: the Vance family. And judging by Martha's tone, there was more than just one or two of them. Who's leading them? Did they give names? I asked. Security said there's a woman in her 50s claiming to be your ex-mother-in-law, Mrs. Vance, and a younger woman named Chloe Vance. There are a few other men and women, looking like distant relatives, all screaming for justice, Martha spoke quickly. Security says they're highly agitated. Their profanities have already upset several residents. They're asking how you want to handle it. I let out a cold laugh. Of course it was them. My former arrogant future mother-in-law and the spoiled sister-in-law who only knew how to ask Sterling for money. It seemed the domino effect of the bankruptcy, Sterling's disappearance, and Serafina's fleeing had finally forced them off their couches. Instead of figuring out how to clean up their own mess, they came to me demanding justice. It was laughably stupid. I spoke to the project manager on the screen. I apologize, I have an urgent matter to attend to. We'll continue this later. I muted the mic and turned off the camera. Does Mr. Thorne know? I asked Martha. He left for the office early this morning. His assistant might be busy. We haven't been able to reach him yet, Martha replied. I thought for a moment. Julian wasn't here, but this was his territory. Security was tight. They couldn't force their way in. But letting them scream at the gates was a bad look, and people would gossip that they had come to my door. I didn't mind going down personally to put a perfect period on this noisy farce. Tell security, I stood up, my tone calm. Ask them to politely escort those VIP guests to the private reception room by the lobby. I'll be down in 10 minutes. Note that I said times politely ask. If they refuse to cooperate, treat it as disturbing the peace. Call the police if necessary. Yes, ma'am. Martha immediately went to relay the message. I went to my room, changed out of my loungewear, and put on a structured cream pantsuit. I fixed my hair and applied a bold red lipstick. The woman in the mirror had sharp eyes and a steady aura completely different from the cautious future daughter-in-law who always tried to accommodate the Vance family in my memories. Ready. I took Martha and took the elevator straight down to the first-floor reception room. It was an enclosed, private space, usually quiet, but now it was echoing with loud arguments. Through the glass, I saw about 5 or 6 people sitting or standing inside. The leader was Sterling's mother, Mrs. Vance. She wore a slightly outdated designer dress, her hair messy, her face flushed with exhaustion and anger. She was waving her arms, screaming at the stoic security manager. Chloe Vance sat on a sofa nearby, wearing a cheap sequin dress, her makeup heavy, her eyes red and puffy. She was sobbing while glaring around the room with hateful eyes. The other 3 were unfamiliar faces, probably distant relatives, who rarely visited but swarmed like vultures when trouble hit. Now, they were all chiming in, their faces showing a mix of greed, anxiety, and a morbid curiosity for drama. I pushed the door open. The room instantly fell silent, every eye locked onto me. Mrs. Vance's cursing stopped abruptly. Chloe's sobbing turned into a wide-eyed glare. The relatives looked surprised or probing. I acted as if I didn't see the colorful expressions on their faces. I walked straight to the armchair at the head of the room and sat down leisurely. Martha stood silently behind me. Mrs. Vance. Miss Vance. Everyone I spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut clearly through the residual noise in the room. I hear you're looking for me. What is it? You can speak now. I called them Mrs. Vance and Mrs. Nalini. Vance, not Mom or Chloe like before. The distance was immediately established. Mrs. Vance seemed triggered by my extreme calmness and arrogance. She shot up from her seat, pointing a finger at me, her voice shrill with rage. Harper Kensington! How dare you sit there acting all high and mighty? Look at what you've done to our family. Sterling is missing. My husband is in the hospital. The company is gone. The family is falling apart. This is all because of you, you jinx. You homewrecker. You climb the social ladder, turn your back on us, and bite us. Was your conscience eaten by dogs? She opened her mouth and spewed the classic curses of an unreasonable shrew, shifting the blame entirely. As if every disaster striking the Vance family originated from me and not her son's betrayal, their business failures, and their own greed. Chloe jumped up too, crying and yelling alongside her mother. Yeah, Harper, my brother really cared about you back then. Didn't you only want to marry him for our money? Now that we've hit a rough patch, you kick him to the curb, seduce another man, and sell off your properties to cut off my brother's escape route. How can you be so evil? Hand over the money from those properties. That's my brother's money. That's Vance family money. The relatives started chiming in too. Yeah, Miss Kensington, you can't be this heartless. You two were practically married. How can you kick a man when he's down? We heard the Thorne family is incredibly rich. Just a few crumbs from your table could save us. Helping the Vance family is good karma for yourself. One after another, they tried to use morals to bind me, emotions to blackmail me. The intent was blatantly obvious. They just wanted money, as if I were their last lifeline, obligated to plug their sinking ship unconditionally. I listened quietly, my face devoid of emotion, until their voices gradually quieted down from lack of oxygen and my sheer indifference. I slowly opened my mouth. My voice was steady, carrying an undeniable coldness. Are you done, Mrs.? Vance was stunned, then immediately grew more furious. What kind of attitude is that? I looked up, my gaze sweeping over each of their faces. First, Vance Corporation's bankruptcy is due to poor management, project fraud, and a broken capital chain, coupled with Sterling Vance's personal terrible decisions and ruined reputation. Legally and factually, it has absolutely zero causal relationship with me, Harper Kensington. The bankruptcy court's ruling and the SEC's investigation will give you a very clear answer on that. Second, I cut off Mrs. Vance's attempt to interrupt. Sterling and I never established a legal marriage. There is no husband and wife basis to discuss. As for scheming for money, I let out a soft laugh, my tone dripping with undisguised mockery. Mrs. Vance, Miss Vance, how your family sucked up to my father in the beginning, How you constantly angled for my 8 properties. Do I need to repeat it right here in front of your relatives? Who exactly was scheming for whose money? Mrs. Vance and Chloe's faces instantly changed colors, flashing red and white. The relatives looked at each other awkwardly. Third, I continued, how I handle my personal assets is my right and freedom. If I want to sell my properties, I sell them. How I spend the money is up to me. Whether I donate it to charity or throw it in the ocean, it has nothing to do with the Vance family. And who I marry is entirely my own business. It is not your place to point fingers and hurl insults. My voice grew colder, my eyes sharp as knives. Lastly, your behavior today constitutes harassment and defamation, severely disrupting the peace of this residence. Security has recorded the entire process. If you continue this baseless tantrum, I don't mind calling the police right now and suing you for defamation and disturbing the peace. Given the Vance family's current situation, I doubt you can afford another lawsuit, can you? You dare? Mrs. Vance was going mad with rage. She lunged forward but was pulled back by a slightly more rational, distant relative. Chloe wailed, Harper, don't get too smug. A heartless bitch like you. The Thorne family will see your true colors soon enough and kick you to the curb. We'll see what happens to you then. I stood up, refusing to waste another breath on them. I nodded to the security manager standing by the door. Gentlemen, please escort these people out. If they refuse to leave, or if they linger around the perimeter causing trouble, call the police immediately. Yes, Mrs. Thorne. The security manager had been fed up with this group for a while. Hearing this, he immediately led several large guards forward. His tone was firm but polite. Please leave. Don't make this difficult for us. I'm not leaving. Harper owes us. She owes the Vance family. If she doesn't give us money, we are not leaving. Mrs. Vance tried to drop to the floor to throw a tantrum. Chloe screamed along with her. But these were highly trained security professionals. Working in pairs, they unceremoniously grabbed Mrs. Vance and Chloe by the arms and dragged them out. The guards escorted the other 3 bewildered relatives out as well. No matter how much they cried, kicked, and cursed, the guards didn't flinch. They dragged them straight out of the reception room, through the manicured courtyard, and out the front gates. I stood by the glass door of the reception room, coldly watching them get cleared out like trash. Mrs. Vance's hair was wild. Chloe had lost a shoe. The relatives looked thoroughly humiliated. They were tossed onto the sidewalk outside the gates, drawing curious stares from pedestrians. Mrs. Vance seemed to want to charge back in, but was blocked by a wall of security guards. She could only hop around, cursing behind the electronic gates, looking like a madwoman. I turned to Martha. Contact building management. From now on, put these people, and anyone associated with the Vance family, on the permanent blacklist. They are never allowed in. Yes, ma'am. I turned to the security manager. Thank you for your hard work. Please write up a report of today's incident and send it to Mr. Thorne's assistant. Understood, Mrs. Thorne. Having handled everything, I went back upstairs. I was long overdue for the video call. I texted an apology to the project manager and rescheduled. Standing before the massive windows, I looked down at the tiny black dots in the distance, eventually arguing and blaming each other before disappearing into the distant city streets. A cornered dog barks the loudest, but that's all it amounts to. The Vance family's final attempt to counterattack and extort had dissolved under my cold refusal and absolute power. They finally had to face reality. The Harper Kensington they could bully and belittle no longer existed. The woman standing before them now was Mrs. Julian Thorne, a being they could never reach, let alone look down upon. The drama that began with betrayal had reached this point. Everything related to the Vance family could probably be completely closed now. I picked up my phone and sent a short text to Julian. The Vances came to cause a scene. Handled it. Nothing major. A few minutes later, he replied, Got it. Tonight is the success gala for the South Lake Union project. I need you to attend. Consider it a celebration. A celebration for clearing away the obstacles. I replied, Okay. It seemed it was time to step into a truly new life, with a completely new look. As for the rotting past, let it fester and die in the mud. The success gala Julian mentioned was grander than I imagined. It wasn't a small, intimate dinner, but the entire top floor of the Space Needle-style revolving restaurant, rented out to celebrate Apex Capital's successful Phase 1 completion of the South Lake Union Tech Hub and the official launch of Phase 2. This was one of Julian's most significant recent business achievements. It was a chance to showcase his power to his family and the public. As his nominal wife, I naturally had to appear as the perfect, supportive partner. Julian's styling team had arrived 2 days prior, selecting gowns and jewelry, and designing my hair and makeup. They ultimately chose a champagne silk sleeveless gown. The tailoring was exceedingly elegant, the fabric glowing with a soft luster under the lights, not overly flashy, but exuding undeniable status. My jewelry was a set of high-end sea pearls set with diamonds, the soft glow highlighting my pale skin. My hair was pulled up neatly, with a few loose curls framing my face. When I finished getting ready and stepped out of the dressing room, a clear flash of admiration appeared in the eyes of Julian, who was waiting in the living room. He was wearing a tailored tuxedo, looking impeccably handsome and relaxed. He offered his arm. I linked mine through his naturally. "Tonight, you just need to smile and stand beside me," he murmured, his tone rarely this gentle. "I'll handle the rest." "Okay," I nodded. After some training and a few public appearances, I was no longer intimidated. The banquet hall was magnificent, filled with esteemed guests. Nearly every major political and business figure in the city, and even nationally, was present. When Julian and I appeared, we instantly became the center of attention. Familiar and unfamiliar faces smiled warmly and approached, congratulating Julian on the project's success. Their words were deeply respectful, accompanied by a curious reverence toward me, his new wife. I maintained a polite smile, handling every situation naturally. Julian would occasionally lean in to whisper the names of important figures. I would reply with perfect, measured small talk. Our coordination looked incredibly seamless and harmonious. To outsiders, we were clearly a deeply in love, power couple. The first half of the gala was a buffet and open networking. I accompanied Julian, mingling with key partners and politicians, my etiquette flawless. Halfway through, I went to the restroom to touch up. Walking out, I ran into 2 wealthy socialites I had met at a previous symposium. Seeing me, their eyes lit up and they immediately crowded around me. "Mrs. Thorne, you look absolutely radiant tonight," one flattered. The other lowered her voice, excited to share gossip. "Mrs. Thorne, did you hear? That mess with the Vance family is completely over. Sterling Vance's father didn't make it through the night. He passed away yesterday. Sterling held a secret funeral. I heard he even had to beg relatives to chip in for the cemetery plot. It's so tragic. Wow, life is truly unpredictable." My hand, holding my lipstick, paused imperceptibly. Chairman Vance had passed away. The old man who used to act so superior in front of me, whose tone was full of disdain, thinking the Kensingtons were just new money who needed to be taught their place. He had died just like that, quietly, after his son went bankrupt and his family collapsed. A vague emotion flickered in my heart, not quite pity, just something fleeting, but it quickly vanished. The Vance family's fate was probably sealed the moment Sterling turned and walked away at the wedding. Greed, arrogance, betrayal, coldness layer upon layer stacking up, finally crushing a family that was already hollow inside. Is that so? I looked in the mirror, meticulously applying my lipstick, my tone as casual as if hearing news about a stranger. "I wouldn't know. I've been busy lately, haven't paid much attention to those things." The 2 astute socialites saw my indifference and smoothly changed the subject, praising my jewelry and gown before smiling and walking away. I fixed my dress and walked out of the restroom. Chairman Vance, Sterling Vance, from now on, they were just dust of the past. They weren't worth another ounce of my mental energy. Back in the banquet hall, Julian was talking to some foreign investors. Seeing me return, he gave a slight nod. I walked over, standing quietly by his side, playing the role of listener and companion. The final segment was a brief speech and a toast. Julian, the main character, took the stage. His speech was concise but powerful, confident and composed, entirely controlling the room. Under the stage lights, he seemed to glow. It was that unique magnetism forged by power, wealth, and success. The crowd erupted in applause. I stood amidst the crowd, looking up at him, realizing for the first time with such clarity just what kind of man my contract husband was, a figure standing at the absolute peak of the pyramid. And right now, I was standing beside him, sharing this glory and attention. Even though our relationship started as a cold transaction, I couldn't deny that he had given me an incredibly high starting point and an absolutely safe haven, allowing me to rapidly rise from the ashes and giving me the capital to look down upon my former enemies. The speech ended. Julian raised his glass, inviting all the guests to toast to the success of the project and the future of their partnerships. I raised my champagne flute as well. The clear liquid sparkled under the brilliant lights, exuding an intoxicating allure. Everyone in the room raised their glasses in response. Laughter and chatter filled the air. The atmosphere hit its peak. In that harmonious, warm moment, as I raised my glass, my eyes accidentally drifted past the massive curved glass windows. The revolving restaurant was slowly moving. The city's nightscape outside flowed endlessly like a magnificent painting. Skyscrapers reflected neon lights. The traffic below wove a glowing tapestry. Suddenly, my gaze locked onto the exterior wall of a slightly shorter office building across the street. The building was undergoing exterior cleaning. A crew of window washers was suspended high in the air, carefully wiping the glass facade. One group was not too far from our restaurant, separated only by the street and some landscaping. The night wind seemed strong. The figure suspended in the air swayed slightly. His movements looked clumsy and sluggish. He wore a dark green uniform, a hard hat, and a dust mask that obscured his face. But just as he adjusted his posture, leaning toward us to reach a pane of glass, the wind blew his hard hat slightly askew. The streetlights and the glow from the opposing building illuminated a part of his face. Even from a distance, he looked haggard and disheveled, a far cry from the playboy Sterling Vance of my memories. But I recognized him instantly. Sterling Vance. It was Sterling Vance. He was working as a window washer on a skyscraper. My fingers tightened around my champagne flute for a second, then relaxed. I wasn't overly shocked. It seemed this was always a fitting end for him. Bankrupt, in debt, father dead, friends gone. Finding a physically demanding, dangerous job that paid immediate cash was probably his only option to survive. He seemed to sense something, perhaps drawn by the bright lights of our banquet hall, or perhaps just looking up unconsciously. Across the double-pane glass and the vast distance, his blurry, unfocused eyes drifted toward where I was standing. In that moment, time seemed to stretch infinitely. I stood in a luxurious, warm, brilliantly lit restaurant, surrounded by exquisite fashion and alluring perfumes, draped in haute couture and precious jewels, holding the arm of one of the city's most powerful men, basking in the center of success and prosperity. And he hung suspended in the cold, dark night outside a skyscraper, wearing a filthy uniform, doing the lowest manual labor, struggling on the brink of survival. Between us lay not just a pane of glass and a street, but two worlds that had shattered long ago. His eyes met mine mid-air. At first, there was confusion. Then, that confusion was rapidly replaced by a world-shattering shock. His pupils seemed to violently contract. From that distance, he froze in midair, forgetting even to move his squeegee, just staring blankly at me. I could clearly see the complex emotions flooding his eyes. Ultimate humiliation, sheer terror, agonizing regret, and a lingering trace of disbelief. He recognized me. He recognized that the woman he once treated like garbage was now standing on high, an entity he could no longer even dream of reaching. Harper Kensington, or rather, Mrs. Thorne. It was as if he had been burned by hot iron. He frantically jerked his head away, clumsily struggling to hide himself in the shadows, or perhaps praying the restaurant would rotate faster and carry him out of my sight. His frantic, panicked movements nearly made him lose his balance, prompting what looked like a loud reprimand from a coworker. I just watched him quietly. I watched his panic and bone-deep terror. I watched him foolishly try to erase himself from my view. Inside my heart was a placid lake, without a single ripple. No gloating, no pity, no hatred, no resentment. It was like looking at a meaningless weed on the side of the road, crushed by a tire, covered in mud. Just that. What are you looking at? Julian's deep voice sounded near my ear. At some point, he had stepped down from the stage and returned to my side. Following my gaze, he looked out the window too. Clearly, he had also seen the small, panicked figure on the opposite wall and witnessed our brief eye contact. With Julian's sharp intuition and the fragmented reports on Sterling's recent situation he possessed, he instantly understood who it was and what had just happened. He didn't ask further. He simply raised his glass and gently tapped it against the one I was still holding. Clink. The crisp sound pulled me back to reality. "The view is beautiful," he said. I pulled my gaze back, turned to Julian, and offered a genuine relieved smile. I raised my glass to toast this new beginning. Julian's deep eyes landed on my face, lingering for a few seconds, as if confirming that all the shadows were truly gone from my eyes. Then, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly into a very thin but genuine smile. To a new beginning, Mrs. Thorne. We smiled at each other and drank the champagne. The fine wine slid down my throat, bringing a gentle, warming buzz. Outside the window, the city was a sea of brilliant lights. That small, frantic silhouette had long disappeared as the restaurant rotated and the building blocked the view, sinking into the endless night and neon lights, leaving no trace behind. Inside the window, the gala was lively and bustling. The future was full of promise. My story began with a betrayal at a wedding. Now, at a victory gala symbolizing rebirth, I saw the final ghost of my past, fading like a shadow, before the chapter closed entirely. I set down the empty glass, proactively reached out, and looped my arm through Julian's solid one. "Shall we head back?" I asked softly. "Yes," he nodded. We stood side by side, calmly walking out under the gaze of the crowd. Some admired, some respected. Behind us was bustling prosperity. Ahead was a fresh, expansive, and mysterious future. But this time, I was no longer afraid, and I was no longer lost. Because I knew, whether the future held a peaceful end to our contract so we could go our separate ways, or unexpected twists and turns, I was no longer the Harper Kensington of the past, the one manipulated by others and blinded by love. I am Mrs. Thorne, but first and foremost, I am myself, a self that has been completely reborn,